Welcome to everyone in our audience this evening. I'm here in Morehead City, North Carolina at Carteret Healthcare. This is a webcast called Focusing on You, sponsored by Hope Abounds. Hope Abounds is out of Wilmington, North Carolina, and what we do is we provide advocacy, financial support, and other emotional support to folks here in Eastern, Central, and expanding out into Western North Carolina. So we're happy to have everyone here, and we're talking this evening about a topic called What Are Your Gifts?, which has to do with your personal journey with cancer. Today I will be interviewing Ashlea Staunch-Humphries. She is an LCSW, and she's going to explain what that is here with Carteret. And she's going to give us some of her perspective and her answers to some of the questions that I'm going to ask her about being a cancer patient and a cancer survivor. So welcome, Ashlea.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So Ashlea, tell me what you do in your job here at Carteret.
There are 2 licensed clinical social workers that are part of the cancer care team. It's complimentary service to all cancer patients, and we really help the patients focus on the anything that's non-medical part of their journey, whether it's the emotional support, the financial or insurance concerns, different family dynamics that might come up during someone's diagnosis and cancer journey, things like advanced directives and community resources, and really helping link people to outside resources when they need them, and really helping dissolve any barriers that they might have through their cancer treatment.
Awesome. So you're an important part of their care team here then, right?
Yes.
So you sort of had a different perspective on this. You showed me your work badge earlier, and there you were wearing a scarf on your head. So could you tell me a little bit about your own story?
Yes, I actually started working in home health and hospice in July of 2014 and was moved to oncology in November of 2014. My own personal diagnosis came in March of 2015.
So not long after you started working in oncology.
Very much so. I kind of got a little bit more educated on genetics and family history and how mine might play a role in my cancer. And I did have some findings that I reported to my health provider, and I think because I was a little bit more educated, a little bit more informed about what some of my risk might be, then it kind of pushed the go button on kind of having things happen quickly for me, which ended up catching a very small stage 1A tumor that was invasive. It was originally ductal carcinoma, but it had become invasive. And mine was triple positive, which meant that I had 4 cycles of Taxotere and a year of Herceptin every 3 weeks, from May to May. So I'm just I'm coming in on almost like 2.5 years, basically, at this point, past diagnosis.
Congratulations. So. And were you working during that time?
Yes, I worked almost the entire time I was in treatment. I would have my labs done, and if my white counts were low and I was neutropenic, then I would be sent home and I would go home to rest. But otherwise, I kept working the entire time I was in treatment.
That's amazing. How did the clients you worked with respond to that, since they knew you were on the cancer journey too?
Well, I was at first sort of concerned because I didn't want my problem to become their problem. I'm supposed to be the one taking care of them, not the other way around. But I really found with more people I shared it with, they just considered it such a blessing. And they really didn't see me as a cancer patient unless they saw me in treatment, because I, was dressed professionally and I, had my head covering on, and they would look at me, and then all of a sudden it would really dawn that I truly was going through the same journey that they were, and people would sometimes shake and tear up and be like, if you can do this, I can do this, and thank you so much for sharing that with me. And I really was very validated that sharing my experience with them was something that benefited people in a special way. Being both the provider and the person going through the cancer treatment myself.
So what do you feel that folks benefit from when they see you? The time of diagnosis is very difficult. So what do you talk with them about initially?
I know for me, even when I was diagnosed, I had someone with a similar diagnosis who was about 6 months ahead of me in treatment. And so it was really helpful for me to see someone just a little bit ahead, who was probably doing just a little bit better than I was at that time, who I could almost say, okay, if she's there, I can get there too, you know? And I think when people first come into treatment, there's just the fear of the unknown. And there's a lot of worry and concern over what they don't know. And so helping say, well, yes, I did have a port, and I would show my port and explain what my experience was. And everyone's experience is different, but it was just helpful to have someone who could alleviate their fears a little bit, because I was talking to them from a place of having gone through that part of what they had already experienced and kind of having come to the other side of that. So.
And so, as I often tell people, once you have an action plan and you're following the action plan, then you sort of lean back and you're a little more comfortable in that. Is that sort of what you see also?
Yes, I see that they go through the patient education, which really talks a lot about what treatment they're going to be receiving. And then they come in for that first treatment a little bit nervous, but then once things get started, they know what to expect. And the team is very supportive, and things get taken very slowly, and they get watched closely, particularly right in the beginning. And so I think they just feel well taken care of.
And you had mentioned a couple of team members to me earlier that play an unusual role, but yet a comforting role to clients here. Tell me a little about that, refresh my memory on that.
Well, we do have some volunteers. Some of them are cancer survivors too, and they help people with wigs from the wig room. They bring in blankets and things that people, make in churches, and they bring them to the center. They are oftentimes do the meal cart at lunchtime, or know some of the community resources too that they can share. And they even have a program called Dog Therapy that the volunteers started, where they bring dogs into and if someone doesn't want to touch the dog or be with the dog, they won't push it. But for people who find that comforting, then that can be a real stress reliever. We play music that's designed to be stress relieving, and sometimes a couple of our nurses have some aromatherapy blends, and if someone is particularly anxious, then they might request a little bit of lavender, because of that nurse will have one. And we do have a massage therapist on staff too, who is specially trained in oncology massage, that's there certain parts of the time, and he is available for reflexology and hand massage and like neck and shoulder chair massage, what he can do chair side for both patients and caregivers, which I think has been a real help to many people. And in addition to having our usual team of a dietitian and a nurse navigator and other people who also help with complementary services, a spiritual counselor as well.
Wow. So the holidays seem to be particularly difficult for folks, whether you have a cancer diagnosis yourself, or you're a caregiver, or even if you've lost someone during the holidays, it can be very challenging. What are some of the things that you might advise folks in that situation?
Yeah, well, when someone's been diagnosed, it's really a loss. I mean, and when you experience a loss, then it's like an onion. You kind of peel back to earlier losses and remember and maybe grieve those a little bit, especially if they're a little bit unresolved still. And holidays is a time that can really bring up some of those unresolved feelings and memories, and times that sometimes people have wonderful memories from the holidays, and sometimes people's holiday memories aren't so wonderful, So it really can be different for different people. And some people like to experience those times in a more solo, quiet, meditative, on their own kind of way. And sometimes people really like to surround themselves with other people and get energy and comfort and support that way. And I think either way of coping is an individual preference. If you're someone who would prefer to be a little bit more on your own, it's okay to give yourself permission to do that and to say no to some of those invitations you might receive, and not feel guilty that you really just want to spend some quiet time. And for people who really know that they might get a little down if they don't have more people around them, to not isolate yourself, but to reach out and to make a call and to ask people for for help and to be there with them if they need them to be. And sometimes it can be very difficult for caregivers to ask for help in particular. But I think that that people during the holidays are really focused on giving, and and giving of your time and of yourself is a real privilege that most people feel. So I, I don't think that most people feel like it's a burden to be asked to be a support for somebody else. So they consider that a gift.
Sometimes people just need to say yes.
Exactly.
I think sometimes you hear people say, well, I couldn't fulfill the role that I normally do at Christmas. If it's the mother and maybe she's used to baking and wrapping and, decorating. How do you talk to people about adjusting those roles and how to deal with that?
Right. Well, the number one issue is, I'm sure you know, is fatigue. I mean, everyone complains about the fatigue during cancer treatment. It's just enormous. And a lot of times people's minds are still going strong and they think about all the things they want to do and then their bodies can't quite keep up with that. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect. But again, I think just sharing those responsibilities with other people and not just taking them on as a solo person, whether it's getting your kids more involved and letting them cook a meal for you, every once in a while, or whether it's, letting your husband take care of those dishes, or for the men, I mean, just finding those places where they can say no, saying their best yes to the places where they can really give their full time and energy, and saying no to the places that might be just more of a pull or a drag from where they really want to be focusing their attention.
So the best yes could be someone directing other people how to do a previous role or involving them. Is that right?
Absolutely.
I like that. The best yes. And so what about involvement in church and charitable activities and things like that? When you're in treatment, sometimes that's difficult to do, either because of your health or fatigue. What do you advise people about as far as those activities go?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're a patient, then becoming comfortable with receiving and knowing that this is the time in your life where you're receiving. And receiving is just as powerful as giving. I mean, it's a dynamic relationship, and you need to sort of have both parts. And so when you're in a place where you need assistance and you're receiving from other people's gifts, then that's a powerful place to be. And then when you get to a place of being a little bit less tired, or having a little bit more energy, then you can always pay that forward yourself. And it doesn't even have to be to the person who gave it to you, but just to somebody else. That you are continuing that cycle of the giving and receiving that we all need from one another. So,
well, that's nice to pay it forward. My sister and I laugh. I'm a breast cancer survivor myself, and my friends were very generous, and she was helping me after my surgery, and we were in a small, it was a 2-bedroom place, and we received so many flowers that my brother-in-law started sneezing from all of the allergies. Well, I said, they're all so beautiful, what are we going to do? So we ended up taking flowers to other people, and it was like a pay it forward moment. They were so thrilled, and I thought, my friends gave it to me. I was able to enjoy it, and then I was able to pass along that joy to someone else. So it was really wonderful. I think sometimes the difficult part is at least if you're raised right, my mother would say, about writing thank you notes and acknowledging what people have done for you. What do you advise people to do about that? Because there's a little bit of guilt involved there, like I just don't feel like it right now.
Right, and I think that just, again, finding those places where you can let yourself off the hook and, not do, things that are, kind of obligatory, but that you feel really have some meaning, are the most important things during the holidays. We had a little something go through our community, and it was called the 252 Rocks, and it's happened in different communities. I believe it started up in the Northeast, but it was happening in the cancer center where there were people painting rocks, everything from older people to
Oh,
adults
yeah,
and
I've
younger
seen
children,
that.
and placing them in different places. And our cancer center ended up with some. And you just don't know the joy that a simple rock brought to a nurse who was having a bad day, or to a patient who might have
It's
just
like
heard some bad news.
people paint them and they put little inspirational sayings
They
on
do.
them.
They're just, and they can, and they're painted in really simple ways, or some of them are really beautiful artistic designs as well. And but just to have that little just brightness on a dark day.
Gesture.
It's all that it really takes sometimes. You know, it doesn't have to be something really grand. It can be something really small but meaningful.
Right. And then for our folks, maybe they're coming to the end of their active cancer treatment, that can also be a challenging time because you've had a lot of hand holding during the treatment. There's always someone you can call and get an answer, or you know you're going to see them in the office or in the cancer center that week. And what do you see as far as the needs of those folks, and how do you talk to them about moving past sort of some of those bumpy parts?
Right. Well, we have a program called Cancer Transitions that's designed for that in the meantime period when someone is completing treatment and going back to their new normal. And really that program focuses, there's an element on nutrition, an element on diet, an element on exercise, an element on emotional support, and then there's a medical part too where the physician comes in and answers questions. I think people really get used to having a physician answer their questions, and it's really hard sometimes to have that relationship shift and change a little bit. But the team is still always available, and and I really direct people in my breast cancer support group to start to reclaim their own health and their own advocacy and their own ability to move forward every day as a survivor. And you've sort of given up that control, because when you're going through treatment, you certainly can't keep track of yourself as a cancer patient. But then once that active part of treatment ends, then you really come back to being your own health advocate.
So by being your own health advocate, what do you mean by that?
Those are the places where you focus on your gifts, and where the things that bring you joy, and the places where you can give your best yes and direct your time and your energy. You've got to refuel your own well, whether it's through, I enjoy journal writing. I know some people might do yoga or dance or meditate or take a walk on the beach. Some people, have certain activities that they can kind of start to get back to slowly and start to reconnect with people who maybe they've been a little bit more disconnected from while they were in treatment. And people told me, cancer will change your life. And I said, well, I don't want cancer to be my new life. I want cancer to be a part of my new life. And so I've really worked hard, even because I work in cancer and then I'm a cancer patient, I really carved that space out that's not cancer related for me. And that's really been grounding and helpful for me.
Yeah, I always like to make a distinction between someone being a cancer patient. It's much better to say you're a person who has cancer, because a cancer patient implies you're all about the cancer.
Right.
And really it may be a very intense part, it may be a continuing part of your life in a smaller way, but hopefully as you continue along your journey of life, it will just be a part of who you are, but it won't be that dominating part of your life.
Exactly.
So, and what about rediscovering new things in life? Maybe that's given people a new lease on life and they want to try something else. Do you have folks that you've dealt with that have, tried new things?
I have, and honestly, there's some things in the community that have been really helpful too, because when people have finished treatment, they can do things like go to Camp Seagull and Seafarers Survivor Weekend. It happens
is that?
every year.
What is
Yes,
that? Tell me
it's
about
like
that.
a family camp, and there's a patient who had gone through an aggressive treatment, and she had children, and they all went over there and had 2 cabins and got to go through like the family camp at Seafarer and Seagull, and just had such a wonderful time. And they do that every year in September.
And is it Like
it's
a real
completely
camp?
free of charge. Oh yes, everything's open. You get to do the arts and crafts. You get to do the climbing. You get to do the water sports. You get to experience in the full camp, except for it's in the fall season versus the summer season.
So they're reconnecting as a family. Again, it's not about the cancer, it's about
the family and the
family.
relationships.
Wow. And then I saw some offerings too. There's a kite shop here that does,
Well, there's
is it kite flying or what?
Oh, I had a patient come in one time, and he, wasn't really a group kind of guy, so he didn't really want to go to the more structured things. But he came in and he said, "Ashley, you got to know about kite therapy." And I said, "Well, tell me about kite therapy." And he and his wife had ended up at Fort Megan, and out on the jetty, when there's a special little walk you've got to get to get to that spot. There were some really professional people flying kites, and they helped him and let him fly some of the kites, and then they got to talking and found out they had more similarities than they really realized. And every Sunday they would get together, and you could, as a participant, take your own kite or use some of the other kites that were there, or as a watcher, you could just watch and enjoy just them being in the sky. But it was just a very therapeutic way he personally found to manage and cope with treatment, and he and his wife just brought that to us actually. And he said he wanted to be the contact, and so that's why we have the shop as a place where if people can find out if it's going to be going on and how to get there, and it's a point of reference. So.
I love that. So it's not something out of a textbook.
Yeah.
This person found that flying kites, you're out in nature, you're
Yes.
learning a new skill. Meditative, probably.
One of our art galleries, Blue Cell, has been wonderful. Every month they bring people in, and they can be caregivers too, and they do an art project. And it's just another way to be creative, to connect with other people, to do something therapeutic with it's not necessarily talk focused. And so so people find the different ways that they feel like that they're really replenishing themselves again. So I'm trying to think of some of the other. We also have wellness seminars that happen once a month, and those are oncology related. UNC Chapel Hill sponsors them, but they're free and open to the community, and we provide lunch. And they're on different topics, and so anyone who wants to come in and have an expert that Chapel Hill has handpicked to address melanoma or breast cancer or clinical trials or immunotherapy. There's a real gamut of different topics, and so they've been really well attended as well. And so I think there's this mixture of traditional support and non-traditional support and education and emotional support as well. So
And part of the advantage of those educational seminars is people connect because they end up chatting with each other.
Absolutely.
And so that's really nice.
Enjoying lunch together.
Right, right. And if you were to give advice to someone, maybe as they're searching for a way to live their life differently, what's some of the advice that you might give them?
Yeah. Well, I think that, when someone is going through treatment, their life just changes because going through treatment is almost like a part-time job. You really just spend so much time, with that as your primary focus. And so then when you finish your treatment, it's all about the balance. How are you going to balance? Moving forward, in all the healthy ways that's suggested, and still retain kind of who you are and who you still are, cancer or no cancer. And so I think that people, it's just a juggling act, a balancing act, but that's what life is, because everyone has something that they're dealing with, and so we're also trying to figure out how we manage those places. For me, I focus a lot on gratitude. I focus a lot on giving back and trying to find those places where my gifts can help somebody else, and realizing, trying to focus on things with a grateful heart for what I do have and not what I'm missing or lacking. So,
wow, well that's really beautiful. I like that. And what about for the folks that are still struggling? What sort of advice would you give to them, either at the holidays or during their therapy or afterwards, what sort of advice would you offer those folks?
Yeah, and feel their feelings. I mean, feelings are okay. I mean, and they're there just so you can give a little bit of attention to them, and usually once they get that attention, they'll go away. When they're stuffed or avoided is usually when they're the most noisy. And once they get a little attention, they tend to quiet down just a little bit, And so to really feel those, one of my coworkers had a beautiful analogy of tears. She said tears were prisms to heaven, and I thought that was just such a beautiful way to think about
That is beautiful.
tears. And they're cleansing and they're renewing, and they, are not anything to be ashamed of. So I think that when you really embrace those feelings, then they often will shift when the time is right for them to move on. Because it's just energy in motion, really.
Energy in motion. And the fact that there are people that can help you.
Absolutely. There's always someone, always a telephone, or there's so many 24-hour support lines. There's online support now. There are ones that's more general, ones that are more specific. I had someone tell me recently that she really wanted to find a group for metastatic breast cancer patients, and she ended up finding an online group. And before her first treatment, it's a private closed group, and she asked a question about what kind of pre-meds might help her not have as many side effects, and had 70 responses in an hour before she even came in from treatment. So there's just a lot of ways in this digital world that we can connect with other people.
That's true. And many times I've found that although people connect well in a live support group, for various reasons, it may be difficult to come. So those online support groups can be very helpful too.
Absolutely.
And then the counseling part of that, you as a social worker probably offer counseling to folks. There's pastoral counseling and in the community. Also, there's other counselors, correct, if they needed to go a step
Yeah, the
further.
American Cancer Society has, I think a 24/7, helpline, and there are different, community groups that really do offer that extra support, and taking advantage of that, especially during the holidays, is important.
Yeah, yeah.
So in Carteret County, we also have something called a mobile crisis line, which means that if someone is feeling like they're experiencing a mental health crisis, then they can call this number and a mobile unit will be sent to them. They don't need to go anywhere else. And that person can come and talk with them and help evaluate the situation and then direct them to the appropriate resources.
So there's sort of, sometimes there can be a fine line between what normal feelings are, and you talked about acknowledging and letting those out, versus someone that may really need an extra level of help.
Yeah, someone who needs an extra level of help is typically someone who not only is thinking about their own, taking their own life or having a little bit of suicidal ideation, but who is really starting to think about a plan, how they would go through with those, types of things, and so that's when we really would encourage people to reach out and to know that when you really start not only thinking about how sad you are, and maybe, it might be normal to sort of think about what your funeral might look like, but when you start thinking about, well, what steps am I going to take to actually cause this event to happen, then that's when they really need to reach out to a mental health crisis line.
That's a little different. And during the holidays, as you said, is a good time to think about gratitude. As you mentioned, because we may be around more family, which we don't get to see during the rest of the year. So it may be a time to be thankful for folks, despite what they're going through. I remember sitting at Thanksgiving one year, and I had on a beret, and I looked over, and my uncle was going through prostate cancer treatment. And we laughed because he was eating so much. They had it on an appetite stimulant. And we just shared a moment that was really sort of bizarre in a way, where you both have a cancer diagnosis and you're sharing a meal, and I'm wearing, a hat because I'm bald, and he's eating a second place of food. But I look back on that as a lovely memory.
Yeah.
So,
When you connected with a family member in a different kind of way.
yeah, I did. And because he was my uncle, I probably wouldn't have done that typically. But that was special. And then I also remember Christmas not being as fun because I couldn't get out and shop for my kids like I used to. But I did have to give myself some permission. And so I think I may have mentioned to you, but I didn't feel well enough to thank people at the time, but I went back later and I made some, I don't know, I'm not very crafty, but I made some little angel pens to give folks. And it
That's
was
lovely.
so meaningful for them to receive that. They didn't need that. They didn't want it but for me to do that, you know, it probably gave them the impetus to pay it forward to other people.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, we are so well taken care of. I think the rest of the hospital is a little jealous how well the cancer staff eats and the goodies they receive, especially during the holiday season, because the patients and their families are just so wonderfully generous with thinking about us and appreciating us and bringing things in to show us that they care about us. And it's really nice, like we were talking about, that reciprocity between, you know, giver and receiver really does, you know, shift in the balance of that changes all the time.
Right.
So
That's awesome. That's awesome. The other story I can tell you really quick is after I finished radiation treatment, and I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina at the time, and strawberries were in season. And I knew as a cancer nurse, that's my background, that you always get sweets. That's what people brought you all the time. And I remember I had fresh strawberries and strawberry shortcake, and that's what I brought them as a treat. And they just loved
wow,
it because
yes.
it was, you know, a little different. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the big joke, that the Cancer Center and the employees are always fed very well because the families bring in lots of things. Right.
They do.
So did anything change with you and your family after going through your own cancer treatment? Like your children were young?
Yes, they were in elementary school. They're in middle school now. And they grew their hair very long when my hair started falling out. I think that they saw, you know, my having no hair, my husband having no hair, and they realized that they needed to hold on to theirs.
Oh,
I know. and so I just let that happen, you know. And then it didn't get long enough for locks of love, but they actually had a few friends who had long enough hair that they cut
Donated to
donated
Locks
to
of
Locks
Love.
of Love, which was really nice. And now, you know, they all the sports players are wearing like the pink you know, the pink wrist guards
Wristbands
and,
or
you know,
socks or
the football players. And my son just finished his soccer season with wearing his pink headband during the games. And so there's just different ways that we still remember. I mean, you know, that it touched our life in a profound way, and we try not to let it be our entire lives. But we're never quite, we can never stop 100% forgetting about it either, because there is, you know, additional, you know, scans and checks and labs that will just kind of continue going forward too.
Right.
So.
And I think you'll agree, everybody we know in the community has probably been touched by someone who has a cancer
Oh
diagnosis.
gosh, there was a recent UK study where they said it was more likely for someone to get diagnosed with cancer than have their first child or get married for the first time.
Wow.
That's how high the statistics are for young people in that area of the world. So
That's crazy.
I think it's something we're all trying to figure out together.
Yeah, that's right. And there's still a lot of research going on, so what a positive
And
thing.
more treatments, I mean, every single day. I mean, just this morning we had an IDT, and one of our medical oncologists came in and was talking about how many treatments are available and how they're changing all the time. And so instead of just having front or second line, they have tertiary and fourth and more. I mean, you know, so it really does deepen the amount of medical support that can be given to cancer patients, and the newer treatments are, you know, have been shown to found good efficacy too. So
Still a lot of hope. It's getting better. So some of the things that have come out for me talking with you today, and I so appreciate that. You talked about paying it forward, gratitude, transitions, looking at healthier lifestyle through food and exercise, maybe trying some new things. I love the kite therapy. I'm going to have to think about that, kite therapy. Is there any other words of wisdom you can offer people during the holidays before we close out today?
Oh, Just enjoy.
Enjoy.
Enjoy. And slow down and savor the moment.
I like that. I like that. So thank you so much, Ashlea, for all the words of wisdom you've had this evening, and it sounds like you have a great program here at Carteret and kite flying. Maybe I need to come and sign up for that sometime. We have a kite festival in Wilmington. It's only about 3 or 4 years old, and it is amazing. So, all right. Well, thank you so much,
You're
Ashlea.
welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Then.
All right.
And so you've just heard Focusing on You with Ashlea Staunch-Humphries from Carteret Cancer Center here in Morehead City, North Carolina. We have our Focusing on You series the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month, and you can go to our website, hopeabounds.org, or we're on Facebook, or our app, Hope Abounds Inc., or on YouTube, search Hope Abounds Inc. You can find us a lot of places. And we also have a recorded program you can go back and watch the week after, which is the 1st and 3rd. And our past Focusing on You episodes have been archived, so you can go back and watch those too. And I want to wish everyone Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to whatever you celebrate, and have some gratitude this season and pay it forward.